Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, do I have a video for you looking at Capules. Capules. Now these are, this is a word I only just learned recently, but it is a small structure basically shaped like a cup. Usually these things are drilled into rocks and their purpose is kind of a mystery. Their purpose is kind of hypothesized. They're various sizes. You get big ones that are sort of, built, that have clearly been produced with a lot of manpower, clearly been produced with a lot of effort. And then you get smaller ones, which still would have taken quite a long time, particularly because some of them are directly through into the bedrock. And they're just this sort of mystery. We're not sure if they were used in religious ceremonies. We're not sure if they were used for just a simple collection of water or preservation of other liquids. And we're not sure if maybe they had some, wider purpose, maybe for the construction, because they're kind of found contemporaneously. They're found sort of at the same locations as a lot of these, Tas Tepeler regions, these regions where they have the stone pillars. It could be possible that these are an indication of the same group of people that were using the sites. Could also be a possibility that these were essential components that went into manufacturing the site, into making the site. Or it's possible that they were a religious aspect of it. We're going to have a bit of a talk about this today. The earliest surviving rock art that we know about in the world is Capules. Well, Capules and linear grooves that have been made in rocks. These can date from the middle and even the lower Paleolithic times in the three old world continents. Numerically speaking, Capules are probably the most common form of surviving rock art in the world, and they can be found not only in very early and archaic traditions, but also in recent ones. In India, for example, Capules occur in the Pleistocene, but most are from the Holocene, and they were made in the Archean to historic times. In many parts of Europe, Capules are particularly numerous in the Middle Ages, and it's therefore false to assume that Capules are always an indication of archaic traditions. In the circumstances of Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, and the Taş Tepeler region, though, it would normally indicate that these are indicative of archaic traditions. It is doubtful that all the Capules were made for similar purposes, and it's even possible that some of these found on horizontal surfaces were used for some utilitarian process. However, there are distinct differences between Capules and grinding hollows, which grinding hollows are what occurs on near horizontal surfaces and are well over 10 centimeters in size, whereas Capules are frequently found on vertical walls and rarely exceed 10 centimeters in diameter. I'll provide a link to an article talking about the Natufian culture just before the Göbekli Tepe stationary culture. They were regarded as having been a hunter-gatherers society that was positioned on the threshold of agriculture. And this is based on the culture's sedentary nature and the numerous plant processing tools, sickle blades and ground stones that it created, but preceding plant domestication by apparently thousands of years. This is interesting to think about as well, because there are certainly indications that there were plates and grinding stones that were found at Göbekli Tepe and the Taş Tepeler region. I'll provide some links and some photographs of those so you can get an insight into what they look like. Now, coming back to the Capules, I think the most interesting suggestion was that they were for some form of ritual. You can see multiple open Capules here, and one could easily imagine them being filled with different foods or offerings, and then people paying careful attention to see which offering was preferred by which particular bird. And we know that these were people who performed some sort of sky burial, that birds were obviously very important to their culture, and their funeral processes were quite likely to be important to them. I think one could imagine a circumstance where these Capules were filled with some sort of tribute, and then the people paid careful attention to watch which was the preferred one in any. It isn't hard to think about a circumstance where birds would be picking up the grains that are offered in one bowl over the grains that are offered in another bowl and taking those away, and then determining that the grains that were preferred were the thing that you should be sacrificing this particular year. Likewise, if you were going to be a little bit more sort of, maybe a bit more morbid about it, you could probably see other pieces of meat and other types of things that might be sacrificed, whether they be human, animal, vegetable, mineral. There's a whole range of different things that might be sacrificed at any one point in time. And you clearly have in these cultures the worshipping of birds, and potentially carrion, or birds that eat flesh and animal remains. These are clearly demonstrated in the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, where you can potentially see the depiction of a sky burial. I've spoken about this in one of my earlier videos, but briefly, a sky burial is where a person's body is left on an open area, and then birds are allowed to come and pick at the body and essentially take away all of the remaining flesh. This was a way of disposing of corpses for many people, I guess, when they didn't want to pollute rivers with dead bodies, or they didn't want to burn them, or they didn't want to leave them in the ground. It's also, I guess, a nice way to give back something to nature. Probably the final and perhaps the most sensible explanation for Capules, which I will leave with you, is the possibility that these were used for food production, or building material production. That's probably another one that's pretty sensible, but I'm going to take from this website Tartaria Tablets, which is a website I found researching Capules, and do a little bit of a reading from here, which says that Capules have been found on the top of T-pillars, and might be rain and fertility related. And then it goes on to say that Capules are an enigmatic style of rock art that is found universally throughout the entire archaeological world. In California, they are known as bedrock mortars and are a central part of the acorn grinding indigenous cultures that were well known in California. Throughout the world, Capules are commonly attributed to the work of ancient peoples and their quote-unquote primitive methods for food production. But there are currently no known methods to date them, and they've been passed over for generations as little more than curiosities barely worth a mention. It can be readily seen, though, that many of the Capules could possibly have been for other unknown functions, or perhaps even from an unknown age. This is yet to be revealed. For example, in a brief survey of the very few sites in California, one can observe that many of them would appear to be too small for any sort of food production, and they can be seen in groupings or arrangements that would seem to suggest something more. Many of the arrangements can be found on the vertical sides of boulders, where, once again, any efficient means of food production would have to be questioned, if not ruled out. But what stands out again is more that this is a form of rock art that shows up in the most ancient and most enigmatic of the most sacred sites found all over the world. They appear in the most highly ritualized and sacred ceremonial settings on every continent, including many islands, from the famous stone of the Moai of Easter Island to the megalithic Olmec heads of Mesoamerica, to the giant stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which we're talking about today, and even possibly on the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. There are tens of thousands of other known sites that exist all around the world as well. Here we can see some more that I have got pictures of in this video, which is, I've just held terribly, but I think they kind of look, to my mind, like they were probably used for some sort of building purposes, perhaps for mixing cement, but then many of them look like they were used for mortar, or possibly even water collection. I suppose that's one of the fantastic things about Göbekli Tepe and the Taş Tepeler region, is that we're free to speculate, explore, hypothesize, and make money from these ancient people, which is what I intend to do once I have enough subscribers. So like and subscribe to endorse my low quality, highly plagiarized content. I will include some web links to reduce the amount of plagiarism and hopefully the academic quality of this video. Alright, hope you are all well, and I look forward to speaking to you about Göbekli Tepe, Taş Tepeler region, Capules, and other things which I intend to teach you over the forthcoming weeks, days, months, and years.